My name is William Edwin Miller, better known locally as Dusty, which is a nickname I got during my bomber service with the RAAF in England during the Second World War. Here I mentioned there were 3 musterings when we originally trained. By the time we got on to Wellington had a crew of 5 people, which was a pilot, a navigator, observers then were split between, that became either a navigator or a bomb aimer. And the WAGs were the wireless operator, and then they had a rear gunner, and that was at the tail end, and he had 4 303 machine guns, which were like 303 rifles like they had in the First World War, and the enemy fighters had guns of 20mm cannon. So we weren't there to get involved in dogfights, we were there to drop bombs. And so to get crewed up, it varied a bit in different areas, and where I was at Silverstone, all the fellows that were there were left to themselves to sort themselves out into who flew with who. And how it usually got down to the pilot, who naturally was the main member of the crew, he found himself what he thought was a good navigator, and between them they'd go around and talk to the various fellows and decide what they thought might be the best bloke to make up the rest of the crew. And then when we'd trained together for a while, we then went on to a conversion plane called the Manchester. And the Manchester was a 2-engine plane, but bigger than the Wellington, and more or less the configuration of what became the Lancaster, which became the Gen bomber in Europe during did the best job. I mean, the Halifaxes did a good job too, but the Lancaster one really was the one that outshone and took a lot of punishment. And after we'd survived the rigours of being on Manchesters for about a month with all the hazards they'd created, we got onto Lancaster, and I was stationed at number 9 RAAF squadron at Bardney in Lincolnshire, and Bardney was about 12 to 14 miles outside Lincoln, and in Lincolnshire alone there were 47 bomber squadrons in Bomber Command, and there were a number of Australian squadrons which had mainly Australians on it, and 2 of them were at Waddington, which was quite close to where I was. But unfortunately, I was on this RAF squadron, and the most we ever had at Aussies at one time was 4, and sometimes I was the only one. And just to emphasise again the losses, when we got to the number 9 squadron at Bardney, there were roughly about 30 crews to make up a squadron, and of the ones that were there when we arrived, not one of them finished a tour of 30 ops.
Mm. Not one.
Not one. We were at and it in the concentration. There was a period where we concentrated on bombing Berlin, and there were 16 raids in a fairly close period, and our crew were on 13 of that 16, which was and Berlin was very heavily defended naturally, and just why they had to keep bombing it so much. Berlin is a laid out city as comparing to London. When London was being bombed, there was a lot of damage with bombs and incendiaries, and fire did more damage than the bombs, but it didn't work that way in Berlin because it was more spread out and the fires didn't affect it as much. And it sounds like a bit of a skydiving thing, but when we'd done quite a few ops, we were invited to join the Pathfinder Squadron, which developed a bit earlier along the line, and they were fellows with pretty good experience and also had more updated navigational equipment than the rest of us had. You know, everything was done gradually, and we were invited to do after we'd done about 20 ops, our crew was invited to join the Pathfinders because our crew had the most and best photos, because after we dropped our bombs, a photo was taken so they could see when we got back who'd hit the best and all that sort of stuff. And we had a pretty good record. Okay, the skipper was keen to go, real keen, and we were working well as a crew, and because it needed cooperation of everybody, whilst pilot was naturally the most important bloke. And just while we're touching on that, strangely enough, even though I was down the rear end in the turret, that was my official position, I was more, if anything if the skipper had got wounded or anything like that, I was the only one in the crew that was prepared to go up front and give it a go to get us back to England, and we'd bail out. I wouldn't attempt to land it and just expanding on that a bit more. During our getting to know each other and working together as a crew in non-operational events, back even in the Wellington days and in the early Lancaster days, I used to be up front with the skipper, learning how to handle it and that sort of thing. And but anyway, to get back to why we didn't join the Pathfinder, we'd done quite a few trips, and the strain was very prominent, and we declined the offer. It would have meant us doing 45 trips instead of 30, and that was just too much. And just to highlight a couple of, whilst it was all shocking stuff with the amount of flak and the amount of fighters and the searchlights, they had special searchlights called the green ones, and if you got caught in them, they coordinated better with their accurate guns, and you very had little chance of getting away from that lot. But one night in particular, before we'd taken off, the bomb load was varied depending on the target, and on this particular night we had what we called a cookie, which was a 4,000 pound bomb made up of incendiaries, which gave us a load of about 8,000 pound. And on this particular night, while we were in the plane doing our checks and the various things before they started up the motors, the cookie fell out of the bomb door. It was still open, and the cookie fell out of the bomb bay, and naturally it only fell from the ceiling down there, and naturally didn't go off at that 40 that far, but it gave us a bit of a shake just the same. So anyway, the armoury blokes came out and repositioned that, and that put us behind time because we all were given a set time, so we'd be spread out, and we'd all didn't, 5 or 6 or 1,000 planes didn't all hit the target at the one time. And anyway, we got off and got going late, half an hour late, and we were over the North Sea, and the intercom broke down, and it's very important, see, because in the plane with 4 Rolls-Royce Merlins pounding in your ears, there's no air conditioning, you had to rely on your intercom, and the wireless op didn't manage to get it going in a sort of a fashion which wasn't real good. But anyway, we decided to press on because in amongst all this we were under constant threat of LMF, which was lack of moral fibre, which was bloody awful to pardon me by French, but it was scary business, and you could understand. And we were under threat of this LMF if we turned back for some trivial, what they considered a trivial reason. And well, up to this stage, we were still pressing on. But when the Wallasop got the intercom working, which wasn't real good, but it was, we reckoned that we'd manage, the port out motor caught fire. And fortunately, they were all fitted with fire extinguishers, and the flight engineer, we had a crew of 7 in a Lancaster boat, and would include the flight engineer and the mid-upper gunner. But anyway, the flight engineer pressed the right button and the fire went out. But there we were, over the North Sea with a full bomb load on, and at about 12,000 feet, and couldn't climb any higher on 3 engines with a lot of fuel still on, and we had to make a decision, and we all said, "Home, James, and don't spare the horses." And that was accepted as a good reason for not going. We would have been sitting ducks at that height with very little manoeuvrability, when the fighters got at us. So that was a bit of an upsetting thing.